Good day, everybody. Dr. McGuire checking in for another talk on careers. We don't have a cowboy in front of me today, but it looks like we do. Today, we're going to talk about law enforcement, right? Law enforcement, Mr. Mario. How are you, sir, by the way?
Good. How are you doing, Doc?
Good, good. Thanks for
Good.
joining. As we know, law enforcement is a biggie, big topic among teenagers today and young adults. And boy, you of anybody knows how it evolved over the years. Law enforcement, good or bad or indifferent, right? Um,
Definitely.
so I appreciate you hopping on. So you were in law enforcement. You are now retired, right?
Yes, I am.
Now you're happy. You're enjoying your life.
I am. I'm a general manager at a brewery in
Awesome,
Delaware. So yeah,
awesome.
nice.
I love that. So let's talk about your law enforcement. Let's go way back.
Okay.
You have several years in the industry, but we'll break those down in a second. But what made you go into law enforcement to begin with?
Well, as corny as it sounds, I wanted to do something that I felt like could help. I felt I had the tools to help people. Um, I I always felt like I wanted to give back to my community. That was the way that I could.
Mhm.
Little funny anecdote. I was always a big Batman fan growing up as a kid. So Batman was always like, the greatest detective in the world and all of these things. So, um, just that kind of I was always fascinated with law enforcement and things they were doing. And I always felt like I always wanted to be one of the good guys and, and, and help the community out as best I could.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how old were you when you entered this field?
I was 20. I started in the police academy when I was about 24 and a half. I was approximately 25 years old.
Okay, and
So,
what were the requirements back then, if you could remember?
I mean, the requirements were that you needed 2 years of college.
Okay.
You basically needed, you went through it was a pretty rigorous screening process. You had to take an entrance exam. That was the first step. Once you got through the entrance exam, it was about 100 questions. You had like an hour to do so. If you scored high enough on that, then you would get a phone call. You went through a pretty rigorous screening process. A background investigator would talk to people from your past, teachers, family members, people that knew you growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had to go through a polygraph test. Once you passed that, you went through what was called an oral board. So you'd sit there with about 8 other officers, a couple from the department you're applying to, a couple from different various departments. They would ask you all kinds of questions and scenarios, and you'd have to basically answer all these things. Then you had to go through a physical fitness test after that, and then if you got through all of those things, you would get a conditional offer to be a police officer in the academy. Academy was 6 months of training, all kind, you name it, report writing, law, traffic, everything that is involved.
Sure, sure.
You had to
All right,
make it.
so let's just jump in. So okay,
Okay.
after training, what was your first assignment? What did you do first?
So when I graduated the academy after 6 months, you're in what's called a field training program with a senior officer for 14 weeks, and you're assigned to a patrol. So as a patrol officer, you handle everything. If you call 911, that's who you got. You got a patrol officer, whether it was a domestic violence call, whether it was a drunk driver, whether it was someone being disorderly in a convenience store, or you name it. Patrol officers were always the first line to respond to any of those calls. Even the big calls, like if someone broke into your home, or if there was a robbery in progress or a shooting, whatever it was, you were the first line of response.
Let me ask you this. So since you were out in the field with this first,
Yeah.
you're new, right? You're getting a feel for the whole.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what personal skills do you think an officer should have? Because they don't teach you that.
No.
I'm assuming.
They try. I mean, you do a course in. There's a whole week's course on dealing with people in the academy, but it's a skill that I mean, it's not really a skill you can teach. I mean, for me, being in law enforcement, you really have to know how to talk to people, de-escalate situations,
Yeah, give me
try
an
to
example.
try to relate with people. For instance, especially on a domestic violence call, and a lot of officers get injured and killed in domestic violence calls, unfortunately, because there's so um, there's so much going on there with the victim and the assailant. So when you get there, emotions are heightened. Everything is heightened. Sometimes there's already been violence committed. So you really have to go in there, and you're dealing with an individual who's committing abuse, who's already he's already at level 10. So if you go in at level 10, all you're going to do is escalate that situation.
Mhm.
So when he's at level 10, you try got to bring him down to level that's manageable, level 4, level 5. Otherwise, there's going to be more violence occurring, maybe again to the victim or even to you as a police officer or your partner. So you have to be cognizant of those type of things. Being able to, talk to them, get their name, understand where they're coming from, ask them what happened. They always want to tell you their side of the story. And
Well,
um,
let me just jump in. So I
yeah,
get that you want to be the good guy as best as you can,
yeah,
relatively speaking. But why
right.
I and I'm just stereotyping here. Why do officers get a bad rap sometimes with the way they? I know there's two sides of the story. I get that, but you know what I'm saying.
I do, and I think sometimes some officers will get overly aggressive, um, and I can understand that because there are situations like, let's say you go to a shooting call, and the information that you're getting. So when you call 911, the call taker takes all this information from you about what they know, what's going on, and they relay that to us the best that we can, so we can approach the situation properly. There are times where someone calls the police, and the person that calls in says, "There's a gun. He's shooting, or he's involved. He just shot somebody." So when we get there, we're we're already under the assumption that this person is armed and is going to cause harm. So what do we have to do? We have to react. We have to make sure that we find out where this gun is, or if he has a gun, we have to make sure we can disarm him somehow, or God forbid if there's it could be a shoot situation where he's threatening the lives of citizens or us. So if we and a lot of times that information that we're getting isn't accurate.
Mm,
So we're going and thinking there's a gun involved and there isn't. That's just one example. And of course, we're more heightened. We're hyper focused on safety, and that's where people don't understand a lot of times that situation where they might think, oh, this officer is overly aggressive. These officers are awful. He came in here and they put me in handcuffs. Well, it, depending on what information that we had, that's the best way we could to make sure everyone was safe at the time. Now, then we investigate and find out what's going on. You know, but you have to secure what we call securing the scene first.
gotcha. All right. So you did that for how long?
I was a patrol officer for about 12 years.
12 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you then moved on to a different division, a different piece of this. What was
Right.
that?
So then I became a child abuse detective. And I used to investigate child abuse crimes, whether they're in the home, stranger, and
How did you get involved in that? How did you get involved in that part?
I just, children, it, being a police officer, you do what you can to help as much as you can. You have to work within the system. We have rules. People always forget that. Criminals don't have rules. Criminals do what they want. We have to go by the rules. We have laws that we have to follow, procedures and so forth. So um, children are the most innocent for me. They always were. They don't understand anything. They're taken advantage of. And when you become a child abuse detective, you really understand that because these children are being abused in their home. They have nowhere to go. They feel trapped. So you're a lot of times their only advocate.
Yeah.
You and maybe a child protective services worker that you're working with on these cases. We used to get a lot of calls from the schools. Um,
Mm.
these kids would go into schools and they would disclose that they were sexually abused or physically abused, and we'd have to go and investigate. And that's when you really understand that these children are just, they're scared to death, by the way. They're scared to death to tell you anything.
Sure, I get that.
Yeah.
So how long did you do that for?
So I did child abuse for about 9 to 10 years.
A lot.
And then I was in the same field, and I became what's called a child exploitation detective.
What's the difference?
That's you deal with more sex trafficking of children,
Oh,
pornography. It's a little bit more involved in that aspect of it. Child abuse is more of the perpetrators usually in the home.
yeah.
Child abuse cases. Our department, we had a pretty big department, and we had about 1,200 officers. So we had different. So it was called the Special Victims Investigations Division that I worked in. So it was a big division. We had child abuse detectives, we had domestic violence detectives, we had runaway detectives, and we had child exploitation detectives as well. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that involved looking at a lot of images that I still can't get out of my head sometimes. So.
All right. So from a career perspective, you had 3 different levels here as to
the
roles, right? Personally, on a personal level, right? Because you have to love what you do, that type of thing. You do what you love. What level? Which one did you like the best? And was it a progression for you? Go ahead.
I stayed in that division because that was the most rewarding. Like I said, these children were taken advantage of, and they had nobody, and you really felt like you were making a difference. If I could put this perpetrator away and get that child to some sort of safety and normalcy, that made me feel the most rewarding.
Yeah.
And I still have victims even today that were very young when I was helping them, and they invited me to their graduations.
Wow.
And a couple of them became police officers themselves. So
that's cool.
Yeah, very rewarding.
So is it safe to say that you are an adrenaline junkie?
Yeah. I think every police officer is an adrenaline junkie in some degree.
Sure.
Because you are, especially when you're on the road. You could go from a shooting to a traffic complaint. So you're going lights and sirens to a call. Next thing you know, you have to take a traffic complaint, which is pretty minimal risk. So yeah, there's definitely ups and downs. Your adrenaline is definitely up. And now, when you're a detective investigating, you spend more of your time gathering facts, so there's not that much of an adrenaline flow. Now, there were times where we had to do warrants, search warrants and so forth, and we have to go into a home.
Yeah.
But yeah, your adrenaline was definitely up.
What kind of person is best fit, in your opinion, for the investigative side? Because, like you said, it's more, I guess, more office time. I guess more not on the. I don't know. What's the difference? Like, what out of the 3 that you did suits somebody better than the next job, or not?
Now, they all have their different stressors. If you're more of a cerebral-minded type of person, where you like to dig into the net, like the innards of what's going on, detective work is definitely more for you, because you really have to get into the case and look at every aspect of every fact that you have, and you have to go to every lead. Sometimes as a patrol officer, you're just putting band-aids on everything. Because you don't have the time to do that. You don't have the time to take it in every case. And as a patrol officer, if you go on a child abuse case, you call the child abuse detective. He comes out and has to get into it. So it's hard to get involved in cases. So yeah, if you're more of a thinker, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I think a lot of police officers, I think you get their stereotype as being dumb. But a lot of them are not. They're pretty smart. And I mean, not that I have a master's degree. People are always like, "You have a master's degree? What did you do with a master's degree as a police officer?"
That's funny. I
just wanted to be self-educated.
Yeah. Well, so help folks out here. So those who want to go into the field, and there are a lot of them. Again, times are different. You know that, way different.
The
what do they need
best.
to know?
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What do they need to know? Give some talk on what, if you were starting out today. Um,
The best advice I could give them is with the political climate the way it is today is not to get caught up with that kind of thing. Remember, you have a job to do. Focus on your job. Try to do that the best you can, and understand that really it's hard to do. Try to drown out the noise around you because if you don't, you'll drive yourself crazy. All you're doing, you're adding more stress to a stressful job. Those
but
things are always
what
going to
outside
exist.
what outside noise would they listen to? Give me an example.
For instance, defund the police movements,
Uh,
things of that nature. I think when the media portrays, well, to be honest, the media loves sensationalism, right? So
yeah,
when a cop does something wrong, it's on a loop. You hear about it every 2 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. But you don't hear about the 90% of the cops that do good work, that are out there protecting the public and helping the community. You don't hear about that stuff. It's boring.
yeah, right,
Right?
right.
But if they have an encounter with someone, and especially if the cop overreacted and does something, the police officer does something he's not supposed to do, it's and you know this, everyone knows that watches the news. It's on there all the time, being talked
Yeah,
about continuously for sometimes 3 or 4 days in a row.
right.
Um,
What about safety though? What's what's in place to ensure as best as possible the safety of say officers, not when you're out in the field today versus when you were there? The body cams, right?
yeah, body cams are great.
Yeah,
They're a lot of times they help exonerate the police officer if there's an allegation of wrongdoing.
yeah,
And it also gives everyone an idea of what really happened. Videos don't lie. It's on video, that, it is what happened. And the public can get an idea of why maybe a police officer responded the way he did. They can understand it better. So, yeah, I do love body cams. But also, sometimes they don't work. Especially if you're fighting for your life in a scuffle, I've
yeah,
had guys rip the body cam right off my vest.
yeah,
So it happens. But I mean that's not a common
yeah.
occurrence. The best
Is
thing
there
I
any,
can do, especially, is tell people especially on a traffic stop, because a lot of things happen on traffic stops, right? You always see traffic stop situations. You know, it's follow the officer's commands. I will tell you 9 times out of 10, when bad things happen, it's because people just refuse to listen.
yeah,
And we have a system. It's not perfect. Okay, there's a lot of things that can be fixed. The justice system is not perfect. We're human, so there's errors. And just remember, most of the times, if you do what you're supposed to do, the officer asks you to do something, just do it for the time being. You'll have your day in court.
sure, sure. All right, so that's all good stuff. From what you know today, or even when you were there, in terms of education and college, is there any compensation there with the department and an officer?
The conversations of what now? I'm sorry.
Compensation? Did they pay for you to go to school?
No. Well, oh yes, they did. My department gave me I don't know, like a 20% stipend.
Yeah,
Well, it's better than nothing. So,
yeah, yeah.
but
Okay.
most of it was um, I paid out of my own pocket, but they gave you something. Like
Yeah, okay.
you get $1,500 a year or something.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's jump ahead, right? You have your career, you did a lot of cool things. You have to
Yeah,
keep your eye on the retirement prize, right? At the end.
right.
And what typically is the shelf life for an officer, or I know you did other things, but just to say an officer.
I mean, we had a 25-year retirement. I will
Mandatory?
tell you, most 25 years get you're invested to get your retirement in my department, my old department. Most are 20. Some are longer, but for the most part, 20 to 25 is usually the standard. Most guys don't make it to 25.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
either the stress gets to them or they get hurt on the job most of the times, or it's too much for them and
Yeah.
they leave. You know,
Yeah.
so I would say I'd say it's about 50-50 that make it and don't make it.
Wow. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Let's jump past retirement. So what opportunities? So let's assume, I don't know, on an average, you could be in your early 40s, right?
But depending on when, well, you have to be
Yeah.
21 in my department.
Yeah.
So
So if you play your cards right, you can. This is the ideal world. Early 40s, mid 40s, in that ballpark,
yeah,
you can go
like,
get another job in
well,
law.
21, 25. So well, ideally you could retire at 46,
Wow.
47. I was 50, I was 50 years old when I was done.
Cool.
So, I mean, yeah, if you know, the thing of it is, every day you go to work, you never know what you're going to encounter.
Right.
So, I mean, they want people to stay longer than 25, especially nowadays.
Wow.
Recruitment's been very difficult. It's a tough job. You have to have the right mindset. You have to be able to have thick skin and to
Yeah.
get through things. And you have to understand that things aren't always going to go your way. And you know, most people don't want to be told what to do or they're doing something wrong. So yeah, there's a lot of resentment and a lot of like, I understand it. There's a lot of like, I do understand it. A
Yeah.
lot of anger towards the police. It's just the way things are, you know.
But what other opportunities then after you're done in law enforcement are there typically? Is it government or is there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So after you retire, yeah, a lot of people become like background investigators. Some people go work
Yeah.
as bailiffs in the courthouse. Those are
Mhm.
always opportunities. Some people take a totally different path. I mean, for the most part, employers like to hire police officers. They know we're going to show up for work hard, do our thing.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of landed into this job, and they saw I was a hard worker, and they liked the way I handled myself, and I made it to become a general manager of a brewery. Everyone's like, "Oh my god!" I didn't want
That seems like
first.
the perfect world, Mario.
Yeah, it is. It's really nice. I personally didn't want anything to do. I didn't want any law enforcement job in retirement.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something totally different.
That's cool.
I did that. I did it for almost 29 years, and I was done with it. I did my thing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
All right. Well, all good stuff. Hopefully, folks can resonate and get an idea what it's like to be in law enforcement. Uh,
I hope so.
yeah.
You know, just I think a lot of times the best advice I can give to young people that want to go into law enforcement is just remember, like, if you're gonna go into law enforcement and think, oh, I need a paycheck or this is just a job I'm gonna do, it's not the right mindset to have because you're not gonna last. It's got to be a part of you. You have to be able to want to do it. You have to have that. You have to remember that you're trying to build a career.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, like, once you get into a department, you can move around other agencies. The Secret Service wanted me to work for them for years.
Ooh.
But
What happened there? Why didn't you do that?
it just wasn't for me.
No.
You know, I did. Don't get me wrong; they do great work.
Yeah.
I love the stuff that they do. A Secret Service not only protects dignitaries, people think that's all they do, the president and so forth, but they also they do a lot of counterfeit money investigations and things of that nature.
Wow.
But I just wasn't that interested in it.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
and that's the thing. My heart wasn't in it. My heart was in what I was doing, especially when I was doing the child abuse stuff. So,
Yeah. Good. All right. Listen, hey, I appreciate it. I won't hold you up. Good stuff.
no problem. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Good talking about you, Tom.
Yeah.
Everyone subscribe to his channel, his podcast. He's
Yes.
doing really good stuff.
Appreciate it.
All right, Dr. Tom.
I
Take care.
stand by for 1 second. Talk to you soon.
All right.